I want you to imagine a scenario for a second. Um, just picture this. You have just managed to convince hundreds of people.
Which is hard enough on its own.
Right. I mean, an entire village. You get them to band together for this massive infrastructure project.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
And we are talking about chopping down trees, clearing heavy brush, and laying down almost 10 kilometers of brand new road.
Wow, 10 kilometers.
Yeah, and this is leading right into a super remote village in Zimbabwe. So you're doing all of this heavy lifting for one very specific reason.
Let me guess, to bring in heavy machinery.
Exactly. You need to bring in these massive heavy-duty drilling rigs. So the machines finally arrive. The workers are cheering. The energy in the air is just completely electric.
Oh, I bet.
You set up the rigs and you dig straight down into the earth, like 90 meters deep. You spend days just grinding through solid rock and dirt.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. And at the end of all that exhausting, backbreaking work, you don't find a single drop of water.
Oh, man. I mean, that is just the ultimate nightmare for anyone leading a project.
It really is.
Because you mobilized the workforce perfectly.
Yeah.
Right? You acquired the right technology, you put in the hours, and you still ended up with absolutely zero to show for it.
Zero. And that crushing realization, that is the starting point for our deep dive today.
It's a great starting point.
We are pulling from a really thought-provoking essay today. It's titled Strategic Life. Specifically, we're looking at Wisdom Chapter 85, which is written by an author named Zhu Feng.
Right.
And our mission today is to explore the profound and honestly sometimes terrifying difference between tactics and strategy.
Yeah, which are two words people mix up all the time.
All the time. So tactics being, how hard you work, and strategy being what you are actually working toward.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
Because the author uses a baseline analogy right up front that I think frames the whole problem perfectly. Imagine you are building a skyscraper, but you make the decision to build it on a sandy beach. Right, and let's look at how you actually build it in this scenario. You don't just throw it together.
No.
You hire the most elite architectural firm. You use the most advanced construction machinery in the world.
The absolute best.
Exactly. You source premium steel, top-tier cement, the best bricks, the best glass. The daily execution on that construction site is flawless.
But the outcome is already written.
Yes.
Because the foundation is sand. I mean, the structural integrity of the steel just doesn't matter if the ground beneath it shifts.
Not at all.
The slightest storm and that beautiful, perfectly engineered high-rise is going to completely collapse.
Which really exposes the core danger of efficiency, doesn't it?
Yeah, how so?
Well, all of those incredible materials, the skilled labor, the advanced machinery, those are what the author calls tactical successes.
Right.
You executed the daily tasks perfectly, but those tactical successes multiply out to absolute zero because they are built on a strategic failure.
The zero multiplier.
Exactly. You simply cannot build a massive structure on a shifting foundation. If your overarching strategy is flawed, the brilliance of your daily tactics is completely irrelevant.
Wow.
In fact, brilliant tactics might just help you fail faster.
That is such a harsh reality. So to really understand how this applies to our everyday lives, we need to look at the mechanics of why these strategic errors happen in the first place.
Yeah, let's look at that.
Let's go back to that water well in Zimbabwe.
So that event actually took place in a remote village in the Binga district of Matabeleland, North Province.
Okay.
And the author was actually there, organizing the villagers. They mobilized men, women, the elderly, the youth.
Everyone was involved.
Everyone. The tactical effort was flawless. They did their jobs perfectly.
Right?
But the reason they failed had absolutely nothing to do with their work ethic. It was because the geological experts chose a drilling spot where the underground water table simply did not exist.
Oh man, which is such a brutal sunk cost trap.
It really is.
Once you've built 10 kilometers of road, you want to believe there's water at the end of it. But, if you're drilling into solid rock, a better drill bit doesn't create water.
No, that's
Just
right.
makes a deeper hole. And what's fascinating is that the author points out this blindness isn't just a human failing, it's a biological trap, too.
Right. The ant story.
Yes, he
I-
talks about finding a group of ants in his bathroom.
The bathroom ants are just a perfect micro example of how instinct can lead to strategic disaster.
So he notices these tiny ants have painstakingly built a nest in the crevices of his clean white bathroom floor tiles.
You can just imagine the effort.
Oh, totally. You can imagine the thousands of trips they made carrying microscopic grains of material to excavate that little space.
Yeah.
But the author looks at them and just feels pity Because from a strategic standpoint, it's a death sentence.
Right, because there's no sustenance.
Exactly. It's a perfectly clean bathroom. There is no food source. If those same ants had applied that exact same work ethic out in the garden lawn or, nestled beneath the roots of a tree,
They would have thrived.
they would have built a massive, thriving colony. Instead, they doomed themselves by locking their incredible work ethic into a totally sterile environment.
They mistook a physical crevice for a viable ecosystem.
That's a great way to put it.
And what's fascinating here is if you map that onto the business world, you see entire corporations making the exact same biological misfire.
Really? Like what?
Well, the text brings up that classic market research story about the American shoe factory.
Oh, the two researchers sent to Africa.
Yes. So the manufacturer wants to expand, right? So they send 2 scouts to the exact same region.
Okay.
The first researcher returns and gives this really dismal report. He says, cancel the expansion. There's no market here. Nobody wears shoes.
Right.
But the second researcher returns from the exact same location and is practically vibrating with excitement. He says, this is a massive, untapped market. Nobody has shoes yet.
That is just the ultimate framing shift. It shows how strategy completely dictates reality.
Exactly. The company's entire survival hinges on which strategic lens they adopt.
Right.
If they choose correctly, they unlock massive growth. If they choose the wrong overarching strategy, it doesn't matter how efficiently their factories run or how brilliant their supply chain management is back home.
Okay, let me push back on this for a second, though.
Sure.
Isn't there an argument that relentless hard work eventually forces a breakthrough? Like, if you just keep pushing, don't you eventually adapt and find a way to make it work?
It's a common belief.
Right. To me, it feels like hustle culture tells us that tactics actually become strategy if you just don't quit.
And that is the exact psychological trap the author is trying to dismantle here.
Really?
Yes, relentless hard work in the wrong direction doesn't create a breakthrough. It creates a catastrophe.
Wow.
Think about it like being the captain of a technologically advanced ship. You have the best engines, a perfect crew, the sails are totally full.
Sounds great so far.
But if you are sailing precisely in the wrong direction, your powerful engines are not an asset. They are a liability.
Oh, because
You are just getting further away from your destination at a much faster speed.
you're just accelerating your own failure.
Precisely. And the text gives some very blunt examples of this kind of acceleration.
Like what?
Imagine a company importing a massive shipping container full of women's stockings into a region where traditional dress completely covers the legs and stockings aren't worn at all.
Just a total mismatch.
Right. Or a conglomerate deciding to build a soy sauce factory in the freezing tundra of Siberia instead of, say, a gemstone processing plant.
That makes no sense.
Exactly. Doesn't matter if your soy sauce recipe wins global awards or if your factory floor managers are absolute geniuses. The strategic mismatch of the environment is fatal.
Yeah, you'd spend all your time fighting the cold.
You'll spend all your tactical energy just keeping the liquids from freezing instead of actually running a business.
Which brings us to a massive pivot in our deep dive today. Because if finding the water or understanding the climate is step one for a corporate project, how do you find the right foundation for an individual human being?
That's the real question.
Right, because it's super easy to judge a soy sauce factory in Siberia. It is much, much harder to look at your own life and realize you're building on sand.
It is. And the transition from corporate strategy to personal strategy is where this text gets really piercing.
It cuts deep.
It really does. According to the author, the absolute first rule of life strategy is alignment with your innate natural talents.
Yeah, he shares a story about his distant uncle that I think will resonate with anyone who has ever felt stuck in their career.
The carpenter story.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this uncle apprenticed as a carpenter in his youth. He spent 3 full years studying under a master.
3 years.
3 entire years of grinding, learning the tools, developing the calluses, trying to absorb the trade.
That's a lot of dedication.
But after those 3 years, the moment he didn't have his master standing over his shoulder to guide him, he couldn't build a single chair on his own.
Because muscle memory is a tactic.
Right.
Spatial awareness and structural intuition, those are strategic traits. He lacked the innate architecture for the work.
Yeah, the foundation wasn't there.
Or consider the text's other example. A completely tone-deaf person deciding they are going to become a professional singer through sheer willpower.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because this flies in the face of everything modern society tells us.
It really does.
We are constantly bombarded with the 10,000 hours rule.
Mm.
We're told that grit and hustle can overcome literally any deficit.
Just work harder, right?
Exactly. If you just wake up at 4 a.m. and grind hard enough, you can be anything. But this author is saying the exact opposite. If the path doesn't fit your natural disposition, it is actually better to sit completely idle than to force it.
Because the 10,000 hours rule assumes a baseline of aptitude.
Oh, that's a great point.
Forcing a bad fit is pouring your life's energy into a foundation that fundamentally cannot support your weight. The author uses some really striking historical comparisons to illustrate the psychological damage of this.
Yeah.
Take Mother Teresa.
Okay.
Her innate strength was boundless, spiritual empathy and compassion for the destitute. Now imagine if she decided she wanted to be a rigorous empirical scientist.
Like doing lab work.
Yeah. What if she tried to conduct Marie Curie's highly detached analytical research on radioactive elements?
She would have been miserable. The very empathy that made her exceptional would have clouded the objective detachment you need for that kind of science.
Exactly. You need a specific mental architecture for that work. Or look at the reverse.
Okay.
The text mentions Chen Jingrun, the brilliant Chinese mathematician famous for his groundbreaking work on Goldbach's conjecture.
Right. A true math genius.
A true genius of abstract theoretical logic. Imagine taking that mathematical savant and forcing him to be the head of a human resources department.
Oh my gosh.
Just navigating interpersonal conflicts and office politics all day.
The interpersonal nuance would probably short-circuit his brain. The strategy is fundamentally mismatched to the asset there.
Absolutely.
But let's say you avoid that trap. Let's say you have immense aptitude. You are Chen Jingrun doing math. Can you still fail?
Absolutely you can. Because talent requires oxygen. It requires the right environment.
Okay.
This is life strategy rule number 2. The power of timing and environment. You simply cannot ignore the historical or cultural context in which you are operating.
Right. The author gives a really fascinating example regarding the Yuwu people of Zhejiang province in China.
Yes.
Historically, they have been known as brilliant merchants. They possess these incredibly sharp business minds. They're referred to in the text as the Jews of China for their business acumen.
Right.
But during the Cultural Revolution, those exact same talents became a massive liability. They were heavily criticized as examples of capitalism, and their natural business acumen was completely neutralized.
And the text also examines the case of an exceptionally talented individual involved in the pro-democracy movement who ended up being jailed for over a decade.
Yeah, and I just want to pause here for a second and make something super clear to you listening.
It's an important distinction.
It is. It's fascinating how the author uses these highly charged historical moments like the Cultural Revolution or the jailing of political activists, but regardless of where anyone listening stands politically on those specific events, we're just imparting the source material here.
Right. We aren't taking sides.
Exactly. We're totally impartial. The author isn't using them to make a partisan point. He's using them purely to illustrate the brutal, immovable mechanics of historical timing.
Exactly. The underlying mechanism is that timing acts as a physical force.
A physical force, okay.
You can be doing something that you believe is objectively brilliant or righteous, but if the societal timing is hostile to it, it is a strategic failure to push forward.
That makes sense.
The author uses a very grounding agricultural metaphor for this. He says acting out of season is like picking and eating an unripe watermelon.
Right. You can't force the watermelon to be sweet just because you're hungry right now.
Exactly. You cannot outwork winter. You have to plant your seeds in the spring, and you have to wait to harvest in the autumn.
Yeah.
If you defy the natural seasons, or the heavenly way, as the text implies, you will pay a severe penalty. The author quotes a proverb here, "He who understands the times is a wise man."
So talent is restricted by timing. But what if you have both?
Okay.
What if you are highly talented and you are operating in the perfect season? The author points out a third trap that can still completely derail you, and it has to do with friction.
This brings us to life strategy rule number 3, staying in your lane.
Staying in your lane.
Or, as the text phrases it, the concept of not overstepping, which in Chinese is 不逾矩.
And the examples he gives here are almost painfully recognizable for anyone who has ever worked in a corporate office.
Oh, definitely.
He describes a highly talented general manager's assistant. This person had an incredibly bright future, tons of potential.
Right.
But they just couldn't help themselves. They constantly picked apart and criticized the general manager's policies and decisions, and the result? They were swiftly fired.
We've all seen that happen.
Yeah.
And the text also points to colleagues who make a habit of constantly criticizing their leaders and highlighting the flaws in their peers' work.
Yeah.
These individuals usually end up universally disliked, full of grievances, and ultimately accomplishing nothing with their own careers.
Wait, I have to challenge this, though.
Go for it.
Telling people to just keep their heads down and not critique leadership, doesn't that stifle innovation?
It feels like it would.
Right. If no one is allowed to point out flaws, how do systemic issues ever get fixed? It sounds like a recipe for total complacency. Like, shouldn't we care about the big picture, the fate of the nation?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it definitely challenges our modern sensibilities about being proactive change makers.
Yeah, for sure.
But let's look at the mechanics of why overstepping is a strategic error. When you constantly focus on the flaws in leadership or the broader system, you are pouring your energy into variables you cannot control.
Okay.
The text is remarkably strict on this point. The author explicitly asks, what responsibility does an ordinary person have for the rise and fall of a nation?
And his answer?
His answer is that your only responsibility is to be a good citizen.
Wow. It's a radical shrinking of your radius of concern.
It is about recognizing the limits of your agency. The author actually quotes the teachings of Jesus to anchor this point.
Oh, right.
He says, how can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when all the time there is a plank in your own eye?
I've heard that one.
The strategic failure is obsessing over the structural flaws of your company, your boss, or your neighbor, while neglecting the daily execution of your actual assigned duties.
Ah, I see.
When you overstep, you break organizational trust, and you blind yourself to the things you actually have the power to fix. The author literally advises, even if the sky falls, do not interfere outside your scope.
Okay, let's step back and look at the overarching architecture of this philosophy.
Let's do it.
Because if we manage to find our innate talent, if we wait for the right cultural season, and if we strictly stay within our radius of control, what is the actual victory condition?
That's the big question.
Yeah. What is the final destination of all this strategic maneuvering?
Well, the author saves the most profound pillar of his philosophy for the very end,
Okay.
and he returns to the teachings of Jesus to introduce it, asking a really heavy rhetorical question. What value is it for a person to gain the whole world but forfeit their life or their soul?
So what does this all mean? If I'm interpreting this correctly, he is saying that everything we normally consider to be a massive strategic goal, like building wealth, achieving status, maybe even leaving a legacy,
Right.
those are actually just tactical traps if they end up consuming you.
You've hit the exact nerve of the essay. The author views the preservation and cultivation of your core life, your existence, your soul, as the single greatest strategic imperative.
The ultimate goal.
Everything else is secondary. People constantly lose their lives, either literally or metaphorically, in the pursuit of external attachment.
And he doesn't just mean the obvious vices, right? He points out that people lose themselves pursuing money, power, fame, and lust.
Yes.
But he also puts family, nation, religion, and political parties in that exact same category.
Which is deeply uncomfortable for a lot of people to hear.
It is. Putting serving your nation or providing for your family in the same bucket as chasing money is a massive provocation.
It is, but look at the underlying logic.
Okay.
To the author, all of those pursuits are fatal strategic errors if the cost is the destruction of your core existence.
Wow.
They are all skyscrapers built on sand if you hollow yourself out in the process of serving them.
He uses this striking imagery of a fishing net to explain how to properly orient yourself.
Yeah.
He says you have to pull the head rope of the net so all the mesh is open.
This raises an important question, right? What is the head rope?
Yeah.
The head rope is the main line that controls the entire net. Putting your life and your soul first is pulling that head rope.
I see.
Once you secure that primary strategic goal, once your foundation is solid rock, everything else falls perfectly into place.
The meshes open up.
Exactly. The meshes of the net open naturally. And the author argues that once you achieve this alignment, the rest of your life simply becomes a game.
When he says a game, it sounds like he means you're operating with a totally different set of stakes.
Exactly.
Like you're playing with house money, you can engage in business, you can raise a family, you can build a career, but you aren't desperately attached to the outcomes anymore?
That is the ultimate freedom he is describing. You achieve what he calls a Buddha-like state, a Rulai state. Yes. You move through the world unattached to form, sound, smell, taste, or touch. You can experience the friction of the world, but you aren't consumed by it.
Because your core is safe.
because your primary strategy, the preservation of your true self, is already completely secure. You cannot lose the game because you have already protected the only asset that actually matters.
Okay, we have covered some incredibly dense, paradigm-shifting ground today.
We really have.
We started with the danger of the 90-meter dry well, having perfect daily tactics but a doomed overarching strategy.
Right.
We learned that avoiding that trap means, number one, deeply knowing your innate strengths and refusing the pressure to force a fit where there isn't one.
Essential.
Number two, reading the cultural timing and agricultural seasons of life rather than fighting the current.
You can't outwork winter.
Exactly. Number three, managing your radius of control by staying strictly in your lane and executing your own duties. And finally, number four, protecting your core life and soul above all other external attachments.
It is a profound, if challenging, framework for stripping away the unnecessary noise and anxiety of modern existence.
It really is a complete recalibration, and I want to turn this directly to you listening right now.
Yeah.
Think about how incredibly easy it is to get caught up in the tactics of a busy week. You're answering endless emails, you're grinding out tasks, you're stressing over a project that feels like life or death.
And it never ends.
You're exhausting yourself just trying to clear your to-do list. But how often do you actually stop to check the strategy behind all that motion?
It requires stepping back and asking if the wall you are climbing with such incredible speed is even leaning against the right building.
Exactly. So I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over today. If this author is right, and the only true strategy is preserving your core self while everything else is just a game, look at the things that cause you the most anxiety.
The things keeping you up at night.
Yeah. What parts of your core identity have you outsourced to your job title or your bank account or your social status?
That's a tough question.
It is. And if that title or that status vanished completely tomorrow morning, would your foundation crumble into the sand? Or would you realize that you were finally free to just play the game? Are you exhausting yourself digging a 90-meter well in a place where there was never any water to begin with?